Polished black leather shoes came to a stop right in the middle of the freshly mopped floor. Shimmering streaks of water still trembled on the glossy granite surface, as if they hadn't yet adjusted to the harsh, white fluorescent lights pouring down from above. Lena bent down, gripping the mop handle tightly, her shoulders trembling slightly. She had just finished the third round of mopping in less than an hour. Not a single stain, not a single footprint remained on the floor. But she checked again, partly out of caution, but mostly because her instincts screamed, when Victor Langford shows up, anything can be turned into a mistake. Footsteps echoed down the quiet corridor, confident, steady, heavy, like someone walking on a carpet of power. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. "Don't you ever talk back to me, Lena?" Victor's voice was low, steady and cold, like the marble beneath their feet. He stood directly behind her, his words barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of a god delivering a board decree. She stood upright, head still bowed, voice quiet but firm. "Sir, I've mopped the floor 3 times. It's clean. I was just..." "Shh." He raised a single finger, silencing her like a misbehaving child. "You are nothing here. Nothing. Just clean the floor, or don't bother coming back tomorrow." He didn't raise his voice, but each word landed like a gut punch. Lena stood there, swallowing the lump in her throat, biting her lip. A part of her wanted to laugh. How could someone like him think he knew her worth? But she didn't react. She simply bowed her head, placed the mop back into position, and prepared to go over the floor one more time. And then, smack! A loud splash tore through the stillness of the corridor. Victor, without warning, threw an entire cup of ice-cold water straight into Lena's face. The water crashed down like a storm, drenching her head, neck, and shoulders. It ran down the tied curls of her hair, slipped beneath the collar of her thin shirt, soaking her silver-gray uniform until the fabric clung to her skin. Cold, wet, and stinging. But it wasn't the cold that stunned Lena. It wasn't the water that made her tremble. It was Victor's eyes, vacant, unrepentant, void of any sign that he'd done something wrong. "Now you have something real to clean up," he said, setting the empty plastic cup on the floor like discarded trash. He turned and walked away, leaving Lena standing in the corridor, drenched, silent, and utterly alone. At the far end of the stairwell, a young intern from the engineering department, his name was Dylan, had seen everything. He instinctively lifted his phone, felt the urge to record, but a few seconds later, he hesitated. He stopped recording, closed the phone. He wasn't sure what to do. He wasn't sure anyone would believe him. He wasn't sure he could go up against the kind of power Victor represented. On the 42nd floor, just 2 levels above, a high-stakes executive meeting was underway. No one knew what had just happened. No one heard the splash of water. No one cared about the people not listed in quarterly reports. And no one knew that the woman who had just been humiliated in that hallway, who now stood soaking wet beside her mop, was not a temporary janitorial contractor. No one knew that she had once sat in that very boardroom, where the leather chairs still held the warmth of those who came before. No one remembered that the name Lena Brooks had once appeared in a Forbes article under the headline, "The Silent Heir Behind the Summit Edge Empire." They didn't remember, or maybe they never knew. And that, to Lena, was the opportunity. She crouched down and quietly wiped the puddle, the cold water from the cup, and the tears that never fell. Silence is not surrender, and bowing your head does not mean you've given up. Lena Brooks quietly dried the mop, then pushed the cleaning cart into the supply closet at the end of the hallway, where the dim yellow light felt like it belonged to another era. She didn't say a word, didn't scream or slam doors like someone might after being doused with water. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation. Not for that specific cup of water, but for an entire invisible system that had rotted from the roots. She opened the steel door leading into the small janitorial break room, a windowless space with only 3 plastic chairs and a water dispenser that barely worked. A crooked bulletin board hung on the wall with a faded sign, "Cleaners matter too." Lena gave a bitter smile. 2 weeks ago, she was still in a boardroom in Boston, presenting to high-level investors about Summit Edge's upcoming AI product line, the company her father, Henry Brooks, had built from nothing. She remembered that day, the soft autumn afternoon light streaming through the wide windows, highlighting the wrinkled yet resolute face of her father. "Lena, do you know why I never handed Summit over to you, even though you're the most capable?" he asked during a quiet dinner at the family estate. She froze. "Because I'm a woman? Because I'm still young?" "No." He shook his head, his voice low and tired. "Because you've never understood the hidden side of this company. I read the internal reports every week," Lena replied. "I know everything going on in the system." "No, you read what people want you to see. The real culture of Summit Edge? It's not in any chart." His eyes then weren't blaming, just sincerely concerned. "I've heard rumors about how the lower levels are treated, whispers from behind the scenes. But once they know you're my daughter, they'll never tell you the truth. So, if you want to be CEO, you need to become someone no one sees." Lena didn't answer, but 3 days later, Janet Cole, a new name, new file, a perfectly forged employment history, became a temporary janitor at Summit Edge headquarters in Chicago. Her first day began at 5:15 a.m. Silver gray uniform, stiff safety shoes, and a cart that reeked of chemicals. No makeup, hair tied low and neat, thick glasses to cover the familiar gaze once seen on the cover of Tech Women Weekly. No one recognized her, and invisibility came, easier than she expected. No one asked her name. No one said good morning. No one looked her in the eye for more than 2 seconds. People walked past her like she was just another trash bin in the hallway. When Lena entered offices to dust surfaces, no one paused their Zoom calls. They even discussed IPO strategy right in front of her. A middle-aged woman in legal even said, "Can she clean somewhere else? I can't concentrate with someone crawling on the floor like that." That made Lena smirk. Did she just call me living trash? How poetic. During one brief lunch break, Lena sat on a bench near the vending machine. A young girl from the cleaning crew passed by. Her name was Rosa, Honduran, just 19. "You're new?" Rosa asked. Lena nodded. "Try not to clean the 20th floor if you can help it," Rosa whispered. "People there are mean, especially Mr. Langford. Touch anything of his, and he flips out." "Thank you," Lena said softly. "It's nothing," Rosa smiled. "People like us gotta look out for each other, right?" Lena froze. She was born in Brooklyn, attended private school since first grade, won a full scholarship to Yale, graduated with honors. She had spoken directly to the governor of Illinois just last year, and now in their eyes she was someone they could insult to her face. She didn't react, just wiped the table again. Slower this time. But inside, another scar began to form. That afternoon she ate near a basement window, a place reserved for employees without desks of their own. A quiet guy from logistics named Malik, who always brought homemade sandwiches, sat next to her and nodded. "You good, Janet?" Malik asked. "Yeah," Lena replied. "Just started?" "Yeah, don't really know anyone here yet." Malik shrugged. "Don't worry. The folks upstairs don't even know themselves." That almost made her laugh. But then Malik's eyes turned serious. "But if anyone crosses the line, tell HR. Don't stay quiet like the others." "Does HR care?" Lena asked. "No," Malik said bluntly. "But if you don't say anything, they'll think it's normal. Say something, if only so you know you didn't accept it." Lena nodded slightly. That simple sentence became the first spark that made her begin documenting every small act of disrespect she witnessed each day. Later that afternoon, as Lena was mopping near the executive suite, the door flew open. A director's assistant burst out, flustered. She held a bag of fast food and a lidded coffee cup. When she saw Lena, she exhaled in relief. "Perfect. Can you hold this for a second? I've got to run this doc in real quick." She shoved both the bag and coffee into Lena's arms without waiting for a response, then disappeared back inside. Lena stood there, arms full of food that wasn't hers, not even knowing the woman's name. When the assistant returned, there wasn't even a proper thank you. "Thanks," she said flatly, taking the bag. That was it. That night, as Lena walked alone through the dim basement parking garage, she saw Rosa's car lights still on. She tapped on the window. "You not heading home yet?" Rosa, nodding off at the wheel, startled awake. "Sorry, I'm waiting for my mom to call back. She's doing the night shift at the hospital." Lena looked at the small girl in the worn-out sweater, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Your mom okay? Got a warning for taking more than 3 days off this month, but she's been sick. Lena said nothing more. She just nodded, then handed Rosa a protein bar from her bag. Eat. At least it'll warm you up a bit. That night, Lena wrote in her password-protected digital journal, Day 5. No one asked my name. No one remembers my face. But I've started remembering theirs. I remember the one who snapped, the one who wouldn't look, the one who shoved coffee into my hands without a word. I'm writing it all down, not for revenge, but to prove something. People don't have to hate you to hurt you. They just have to pretend you don't exist. Some people don't need to raise their voice to make others feel small. Victor Langford was one of them. He didn't need to shout to make you tremble. He just had to look at you, and you'd question whether you were breathing wrong. Victor was the head of operations at Summit Edge. Not a flashy title on the org chart, but his power ran like an underground current. With over a decade of experience, he controlled all logistics, maintenance, janitorial operations, and internal technical coordination. Everyone knew, if you wanted your job to run smoothly, don't let Victor dislike you. And from the moment Lena set foot on the 40th floor, Victor didn't like her. Not because she did anything wrong, not because she talked too much, maybe because she was too quiet, and maybe because her gaze was too direct. Friday, 9:10 a.m., Lena was mopping the back staircase near the executive wing when Victor showed up. No knocking, no greeting. He just stood there, arms crossed, spine stiff like he was about to command a battalion. What kind of mopping is this? He asked calmly, but with a tone sharp as a freshly sharpened pencil. Lena stood up cautiously. Is there a spot I missed, Mr. Langford? This is an office floor, not a cattle barn. You overwet the surface. Look. He pointed to 2 small puddles that hadn't fully dried. People could slip. Who's responsible then? You? I'll wipe it again immediately, Lena replied without flinching. No, you won't wipe it again, Victor continued, stepping closer, close enough that his minty breath brushed against her face. You'll start over. All of it. From the bottom floor, then come back up when you're done. Understood? Yes, I understand. Sir, he corrected. Don't forget that. When a superior addresses you, your response is, yes, sir. That's basic respect, no matter where you come from. That afternoon, as Lena was cleaning the supply closet on the 39th floor, an older man named Darnell walked in. Darnell was a black man in his 50s, thin but sharp-eyed. He used to be an HVAC technician until a back injury a few years ago. Summit had then reassigned him to janitorial duties. He saw Lena crouch down, scrubbing the grout near the baseboards, and asked quietly, You new here? Yes, I'm Janet, she replied. He nodded, stepped closer, his voice soft but serious. You need to steer clear of Victor. Don't argue, don't stand too close, and don't come off too smart. Lena paused. Is he always like that? Darnell shrugged. He doesn't hit people, but he wears them down, bit by bit. He makes them believe they're useless, until they leave. Lena looked at Darnell. His face wasn't tight with aggression like Victor's, but it bore the lines of someone who'd endured too much, for too long, with no one to speak up for him. Later that day, as Lena was mopping along the north corridor of the 42nd floor, Victor walked by, holding a cup of hot coffee. Without a word, he stepped directly onto the section she had just cleaned. His rubber-soled shoes left a long black streak across the pale tiles. See that? He asked. Yes. You just walked across the area I cleaned, Lena replied, keeping her voice steady. Then you didn't mop properly, he said coldly. If you did, it would have dried faster. You think Summit clients are going to wait around for your floors to dry? He bent down and lightly kicked her mop bucket. Not hard, but just enough to slosh water over the rim. Lena crouched to wipe it up, but Victor barked, No. Stand up. I'm still talking. She stood tall, still gripping the mop handle. It took everything she had to keep the water in her eyes from spilling over. About 15 minutes later, Rosa pulled Lena aside. You okay? The young girl asked, worried. I'm fine, Lena said with a strained smile. What Victor did, that was too much, but none of us dare say anything. It's okay, Lena whispered, as long as you still know your worth. My situation, I'll handle it. That night, Lena went home, opened her laptop, and began writing her first incident report. Not to send, not to file a complaint, but to document every action, every word, every expression. Because justice doesn't come from momentary outrage. It comes from evidence, line by line, page by page, day by day. Before going to bed, Lena sat quietly in front of the mirror. She took off her glasses, let her hair down, and looked herself in the eye. There was a shift happening, slow but undeniable. Her eyes no longer held mere observation. They carried a promise. That night, the Chicago wind sighed through the basement window cracks. The janitor's break room was lit only by a flickering fluorescent bulb, blinking slowly like a tired heartbeat. Most of the team had already gone home. Lena stayed behind, scrubbing the stubborn stains from her work shoes, partly to pass the time, partly to delay stepping into the darkness outside, where only exhaustion and silence waited. The door creaked open. Darnell walked in, a thick coat over his shoulders, his breath visible from the cold air that followed him inside. He saw her sitting alone, said nothing, poured himself a cup of water, drank it down, and sat on the plastic chair across from her. A long pause passed before he finally spoke. "You know he's targeting you, right?" Lena looked up, her eyes steady behind thick lenses. "Victor?" "Yeah." Darnell nodded. "He doesn't like your type, the kind that doesn't bow too early, the kind that looks him in the eye without flinching. You've seen this before?" "Too many times," he emphasized. "Only difference is, they didn't come back for round two." Lena said nothing, but her gaze deepened. She knew Darnell was talking about the others, the ones who had come and gone, those who stayed for a few weeks, maybe a few months, and then disappeared from the system, the staff list, and the memory of those who never saw them as fully human. "You think you're stronger than them?" Darnell asked, not with contempt, just with a quiet, hard truth. Lena replied slowly, "Number. But I don't think I'm alone." Darnell looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes for the first time. "You just got here, but you talk like someone who already knows this place." "I don't know everything," she said, "but I've seen enough to know. This can't keep going." The next morning, when Lena returned to the 40th floor to begin her shift, she found a brand new cleaning rag folded neatly in a plastic bag on her cart. No note, but she knew it was a silent greeting from an unseen ally. The invisible world operated on gestures like that. No one spoke. But a nod, a bottle of water left nearby, a quiet warning, they carried the weight of a declaration. At around 10 a.m., Lena was asked to clean the executive boardroom. The room had glass walls overlooking Lake Michigan, a long walnut table, and 12 black leather chairs. This was where strategic decisions were made, where million-dollar budgets, departmental fates, and even the lives of those mopping the floors were decided. As Lena cleaned under the table, the door opened. A familiar voice snapped, "Move! I need to inspect this room." Victor. He didn't wait for her to leave. Didn't wait for her to stand. He walked straight across the wet floor, leaving muddy prints on the freshly polished tiles. Then he turned around and pointed. "See that? That's what happens when you work without process. I'll be filing a report. And this time, I'm not holding back." Lena pressed her lips together, not because she feared the report, but because she knew every word he said was part of a script repeated on countless others like her, in a system built to create mistakes, assign blame, and normalize harm. That afternoon, as she rested in the supply room, Darnell walked in with a plastic lunch container. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "Not yet. I'm not really hungry." He sat down, silent for a moment, then opened his container. Inside, mixed rice, vegetables, and a cold slice of fried chicken. "You know," he began, his voice lowering, "I used to be an HVAC engineer. 17 years here. Thought I'd be team lead someday. Then I got injured, and they said I wasn't physically fit anymore." Lena listened, saying nothing. "They didn't fire me. They assigned me. Said it was a suitable job transfer. But really, they just tossed me aside without having to pay severance." He paused, meeting Lena's eyes. "I'm not saying this for pity. I'm telling you, around here we don't get space for defense. There's only one way to survive, quietly and persistently." Lena nodded. But if no one speaks up, when does anything change? Darnell gave a soft chuckle, a smile that was both weary and relieved. Maybe, now. That evening, after everyone had left, Lena returned to the boardroom on the 42nd floor. From her jacket pocket, she pulled out a small device, a clip-on camera, easily hidden behind the decorative plant in the corner. She carefully mounted it, adjusted the angle, checked the view, then walked away as if nothing had happened. A bead of cold sweat trickled down her back. Not from fear of being caught, but because she had just taken one more step. Out of the world of the invisible and into the battlefield. The marketing department of Summit Edge sat tucked into the south corner of the 42nd floor, where natural light was scarce but bold colors abounded. Abstract wall art, whiteboards covered in inventive jargon, warm amber lighting, and circular lounge chairs. Everything in the room was crafted to evoke an air of openness and modernity, what they proudly called a creative culture. But Lena knew, real culture wasn't in the wall colors. It was in how people treated each other when no one was watching. That evening, just before 7 p.m., Lena was assigned to clean the internal meeting room of the marketing division, a room with a long glass table, 4 swivel chairs, and several stacks of documents left on top. She pushed her cleaning cart in and got to work, as usual. The space was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning. But just a few minutes in, a voice echoed from the adjoining office. "Don't forget the baseboards. People always forget the baseboards." Lena looked up. A man in his early 40s, tall, slick-back hair, wearing a fitted white shirt, leaned against the glass door. The lighting caught the gold rims of his glasses. Behind him, his desk held an open laptop displaying HubSpot dashboards and rows of flashing ad metrics. He walked over, not quickly, not slowly, just with the exact pace that suggested control. "You're new?" he asked. "Yes, I was just assigned to this area," Lena replied, still bent over cleaning. "Good. The newer, the better. You learn from scratch," he said. "My name is Damian Carter, head of marketing. I like everything clean, both the space and the thinking." She nodded. "I'll be thorough, sir." He paused, seemingly pleased at being addressed as sir. Lena resumed wiping the windows. She was using a microfiber cloth, following protocol, circular motion to prevent streaks. But just minutes later, Damian spoke again. "You're doing it wrong," he said, stepping closer. "Circular motion reduces streaks." "The problem is, you're leaving fingerprints on the window frame," he interrupted. "I don't like that." He pulled out a tissue, wiped the corner of the frame, and held it up as proof. Lena didn't react. She nodded. "I'll redo it." "Redo the whole thing," Damian ordered, pointing around the room. "Windows, tables, chair handles, even the light switches. Clean people notice what others overlook." She went back to work, slower now, more meticulous. But just as she was finishing and getting ready to leave, Damian pointed to a drawer. "You didn't clean the top of this drawer," he said. "I usually set my coffee here. There could be leftover bacteria." "I was instructed not to touch personal belongings or paperwork," Lena gently reminded him. Damian smiled, tilting his head slightly. "Personal belongings are inside the drawer. The surface is a shared space. A perfect justification for making someone's life harder." The next day, Rosa caught Lena in the hallway and asked quietly, "You had to clean Damian's office?" "Yeah, last night. I hate doing that floor. He acts like he owns the whole building. Once made me clean the same chair 3 times because it didn't smell fresh enough." Lena glanced at Rosa, then toward Damian's office. One thought echoed clearly in her mind. Violence doesn't always come as yelling. Sometimes it's quiet words, repeated daily. Night 2 in Damian's office began the same way. He appeared right as Lena was cleaning the windows. He directed her on tiny details, pointed at spots no one else would notice. He repeated the lines. "That's not how a professional works. Do you know how light reflects off dust? Are you done or waiting for someone else to finish for you?" By the 3rd time, Lena quietly asked, "Which standard would you like me to follow, sir? ISO, OSHA, or your own?" Damian froze for half a second, then gave a thin smile. "Smart girl, but you're speaking like someone who thinks they have the right to ask questions." He leaned in, voice low. You know why I've kept this job for 10 years? Through 3 CEOs? Lena said nothing. Because I know how to keep things clean. And I know how to control who stays quiet. That night, Lena left Damien's office with her head slightly bowed and her shoulders heavy. But it wasn't physical fatigue. She was tired of how men like Damien spoke as if they were the gold standard of the world. Tired of power that didn't need to shout, just slice slowly, drip by drip. That evening, she wrote in her journal, Day 7, a hand on my shoulder, not to comfort, but to command. A fake compliment, not to praise, but to control. A smile, not to connect, but to remind me where I stand. Violence doesn't always have to touch you. Sometimes it only needs to make you doubt yourself. It was the 8th day at noon, just after Lena had been yelled at by Victor for misplacing a power cord. A vacuum cord less than 1 meter long. She was remopping the hallway on the 40th floor when a woman approached her, wearing a soft smile and a pale pink blouse. Hi there, the woman said, leaning down slightly to meet Lena's eye level, like an adult speaking to a grade school child. Are you Janet? I'm Karen Summers, Director of Human Resources. I heard you might have a few concerns. Her voice was gentle, her tone crisp, like someone who'd taken a master class in effective internal communications. Lena straightened up, slightly caught off guard but composed. Yes, I mentioned some things to someone on the floor team about Mr. Langford's and Mr. Carter's behavior. Karen nodded, looking attentive. Right. I received some information from operations management. That's why I really wanted to hear directly from you. At Summit Edge, we're deeply committed to creating a safe and inclusive environment for everyone. The words echoed the poster taped outside the HR office, complete with a rainbow sticker and the slogan, You matter, your voice counts. Lena followed Karen into her office. It was an open, softly lit space with cushioned chairs and a framed photo of the HR team hugging and grinning in front of the company building. Everything in the room seemed curated for calm, but to Lena, it carried the scent of something artificial. Karen sat down, resting her chin on her hand like she cared deeply. Can you share a bit more with me? Lena began recounting, not overly emotional, not too long. She described specific incidents, Victor's demeaning tone, Damien's incessant nitpicking, the hallway disrespect, the whispered mockery in meetings. Karen nodded thoughtfully. Occasionally, she jotted something down, but gradually her expression shifted, from concern to something harder to read, a kind of quiet caution creeping beneath the polished surface. When Lena finished, Karen smiled, a smile that felt pre-programmed. Thank you for sharing. That was really brave of you. Then she leaned in slightly. But Janet, sometimes we may not fully understand the context. Lena looked up. What do you mean? Karen laced her fingers together on the desk, her eyes filled with practiced empathy. Victor has been a long-serving manager. He can be a bit strict, but he's never had a formal complaint. And Damien, he has very high standards, but he's always been regarded as professional. Lena stayed quiet. This wasn't about truth anymore. It was about who had the power to define it. To be honest, Karen lowered her voice as if confiding something off the record. You've only been here a little over a week. As a contract janitor, I think it's possible you're being a bit sensitive to some of the cultural differences in our workplace. Lena blinked. Culture? And if I may add, Karen continued, still speaking gently, when you compare yourself to full-time employees, especially managers, you may feel undervalued, but that's not because anyone's trying to make you feel that way. It's just how our organizational structure works. Lena felt like someone had just yanked the chair out from under her, but her face didn't change. So you think I should accept it? Not exactly, Karen said soothingly. Just understand your place. Lena stood up. Thank you for your time. Karen rose with her, smiling again. Feel free to come back if you need anything. We're always here to listen. The HR office door clicked shut behind Lena. She walked back into the hallway, hollow. Something inside her had cracked, not from the insult itself, but from the quiet confirmation that this place wasn't meant for people like her. At least not without the right name on her badge. That evening when Lena ran into Darnell in the break room, he asked, You all right? HR advised me To understand who I am. Darnell didn't laugh. He wasn't surprised. And what are you going to do? Lena sat down, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Remember who they are. In her encrypted journal, she wrote, Day 8. When I said I was disrespected, they smiled and said, You're being too sensitive. When I said I was devalued, they patted my shoulder and said, You should understand your position. But I know exactly who I am, and I know even more clearly who's afraid of that. Day 9. It was lightly raining. Raindrops blurred across the glass windows of the 42nd floor, dimming the glow of the city beyond. Inside, the atmosphere in the main boardroom hung heavy, as if a silent war had just been waged. Lena was assigned to clean Conference Room A at 5:40 p.m., right after the business division's quarterly review meeting. It was one of Summit Edge's no-in, no-out rooms, the kind where million-dollar deals were signed and leadership chairs reshuffled with a single sentence. When Lena arrived, the door was ajar. The lights were still on. A few people were quietly gathering their documents, standing up. Some of the younger employees whispered to each other. The meeting, it seemed, hadn't gone well. She stepped in, pushing her cleaning cart gently. But before she could say anything, a sharp voice rang out from the head of the table. What are you doing in here? The voice was unmistakable. Veronica Wells, Vice President of Sales, a woman praised as the war goddess of revenue, celebrated for her ability to close deals, dominate negotiations, and command a room like a battlefield general. Lena paused, her tone calm and steady. I'm assigned to clean this room at 5:40, as scheduled by the coordination team. Veronica didn't move. She simply shifted her posture, leaning on the walnut conference table. We're not finished. I can begin at the doorway and clean auxiliary areas. I won't interfere. Veronica stepped closer. Do you not understand English? I said we're not finished. A few staff members paused their paperwork, glancing up. Lena scanned the room. Nearly empty now. Just Veronica and 2 assistants remained. She inhaled. I'm sorry, but I have 4 other rooms after this. If I delay here, I won't complete my assignment in time. Veronica scoffed. Assignment? Cleaning. To standard. On schedule. Veronica crossed her arms. You make it sound like you're saving the world. I'm not, Lena replied evenly. I just respect the work I do. That sentence, simple as it was, cut like an invisible blade. Not because of the words themselves, but because it struck Veronica's ego. So you're saying I don't respect mine? No, Lena replied calmly. I didn't mean that. I just want to finish my job without being obstructed. The room's tension tightened like a pulled wire. One assistant stopped packing files, stealing a glance at Veronica. Veronica stepped right up to Lena, no more than half a meter away. Who do you think you are to speak to me like that? Do you actually believe you have any value in this room? Lena didn't back down. I don't think I have more value than anyone else. But I believe no one has the right to make someone feel less. 1 second, 2 seconds. No one said a word. No one moved. Then, Veronica, eyes blazing, slapped Lena across the face. It wasn't a light slap. Lena's body tilted slightly to the side. The sound rang out clear in the soundproofed boardroom. One assistant gasped and took a step back. The other stared at the floor, lips pressed tight. But no one stopped her. No one asked, "What the hell was that?" They did nothing, because this was Summit Edge, and Veronica Wells was untouchable. Lena stood upright, face flushed, not from pain but from the rush of blood and shock. She didn't touch her cheek, didn't cry. She simply looked at Veronica, her expression flat, as if confirming what she already knew. This was a place where violence didn't need to hide. Veronica's voice tight and final. Get out. Now. Lena said nothing. She turned her card and left like a shadow. She didn't stop at the break room, didn't pause at the restroom. She walked straight to the storage room in the basement and closed the door. In the dim light, Lena reached behind the air purifier, where a tiny camera had been hidden 3 days ago. She removed the memory card, plugged it into her laptop, opened the file. The footage wasn't cinematic, but the image and sound of the slap were unmistakable. She saved 3 copies, one to an external hard drive, one on a USB stick hidden in the handle of her mop bucket, and one on a password-encrypted cloud drive, known only to her and one other person, her father, Henry Brooks. That night, back in the small apartment, rented under a false name, Lena sat in front of the mirror. Her left cheek still glowed red, but in her eyes there was no rage, only a cold, hard resolve. She opened her laptop and typed into her encrypted journal, Day 9. They're no longer whispering behind my back. They slap me in front of everyone, but I'm still standing. And the moment I stand, they should start to worry. Day 10. The morning was colder than usual. Gray clouds blanketed the Chicago sky, as if the heavens themselves sensed what was about to unfold below. Lena entered the building as she always did, in her silver-gray uniform, hair tied low, her footsteps quiet. No one noticed. No one greeted her. To them, she was still just Janet, the new janitor. But only Lena knew. Today, she was no longer just a cleaner. Today, she was the keeper of evidence. The night before, after Veronica's slap, Lena hadn't slept. She stayed up until 3 a.m., organizing every piece of documentation she had: hidden camera footage, voice recordings of conversations, secretly printed emails from forgotten copiers, schedule discrepancies, and a meticulously logged chart of every act of harassment, discrimination, and abuse of power. She sorted the data into 3 categories: verbal and physical abuse, Victor and Veronica; psychological manipulation and institutional gaslighting, Damien Karen; systemic silence from executive leadership. Each category had its own files, timeline logs, locations, and Lena's own written accounts, structured like a seasoned investigator. This was no longer emotion. This was evidence. Lena began her day with what looked like a simple task: swapping out her mop. But inside the handle of the new mop, she had hidden a USB drive containing the footage of Veronica's slap. She didn't plan to use it immediately. She needed to strike with precision and impact. At noon, she found Rosa in the break room. "Got a second?" Lena asked. "I need a small favor." Rosa hesitated. "What kind of favor?" "Just to send a file to someone I trust." "Who?" Rosa tilted her head. Lena smiled. "The only person at Summit Edge who never told me I was too sensitive. My father." Later that day, from a cafe nearby, Rosa, under her real name, sent an email containing the voice recording of Victor berating Lena, along with the video of Veronica slapping her. It was addressed to one recipient only, henry.brooks@horizonsummit.org. The personal email of Henry Brooks, Lena's father, who was still on medical leave. The file was titled, "For Your Eyes Only, She Didn't Break." She documented. While waiting for a response, Lena continued to play the role of the invisible worker. But each night she added one more move to her plan. She planted a tiny audio recorder under the table in conference room B, where Damien often met with partners. She had noticed how he casually spewed degrading remarks when he thought no one was listening. This time, Lena would listen for everyone. In the employee break room on the 39th floor, where Victor often had his afternoon coffee, she hid a mini camera in the gap between a wall painting and the real wall, after accidentally overhearing him say to another staffer, "If you can't handle the pressure, get the hell out." Lena wasn't looking for an apology. She wanted the system to look at itself, not through metrics, not through colorful slogans. 3 days later, a call came through to Lena's backup phone, one only 2 people knew about: her father and a long-trusted internal advisor. "Lena," Henry's voice came through, low and deliberate. "You've gone further than I ever dared." "I didn't go far, Dad," she replied. "I just walked into the places no one else would." He sighed. "What do you want to do next?" "I want to call an emergency meeting," Lena said, her eyes fixed on the executive suite doors. "Not for the whole company, just the leadership. And I want you to be in the room." A pause. "All right," Henry said. "They won't know what's coming." That night, Lena pulled out a black hard case from beneath her bed. Inside, a noise-filtering microphone, a backup power bank, and a small brown notebook. That notebook contained every journal entry from day 1 until now. At the very back, she had written, "If I can't speak in my own voice, then let the truth speak for me." Morning of day 12. An internal memo appeared in the inboxes of Summit Edge's senior executive team. Emergency strategic session, 8:30 a.m., Monday boardroom, 42nd floor. No one knew who had scheduled it. No one knew who called it. But attendance was marked mandatory, including Veronica, including Victor, including Damien, and including Lena, but under a name no one expected. That evening, back in the break room, Darnell asked, "You still enduring all this?" Lena answered for the first time with a smile, "No, I'm not enduring anymore. I'm preparing." Monday, 8:27 a.m. The 42nd floor boardroom gradually filled with the most powerful people at Summit Edge. Veronica Wells arrived first, espresso in hand, eyes sharp as ever. Damian Carter followed, white shirt, gray tie, a Band-Aid still visible on his hand from a weekend paper cut. Victor Langford came in next, long coat, face twisted like someone being dragged to a meeting when he'd rather be ruling by decree. Karen Summers from HR sat near the edge of the table, nodding politely to each person with the air of someone fresh from a positive leadership training seminar. No one knew who called the meeting. No one knew what it was about, but they shared one assumption. They were in control, and because of that, they weren't afraid. 8:31. The door opened. Lena walked in. Not Lena Brooks, the woman who used to sit in that room wearing Alexander McQueen and delivering sharp financial forecasts. And not Janet Cole, the janitor with the silver-gray uniform and bleach-scented mop. But both. She wore a simple white blouse, black slacks, hair down, no makeup, laptop in hand, eyes focused, steps deliberate. Veronica frowned. "What are you doing here?" Victor raised an eyebrow, half confused, half annoyed. Karen forced a weak smile, glancing around as if waiting for someone to confirm this was a joke. Only Damien froze, his eyelids twitching slightly. Something in him recognized it before the rest. Lena walked to the head of the table. She placed the laptop down, said nothing for 5 seconds. Then she opened the screen, connected it to the projector. The boardroom screen lit up behind her, displaying the title, Summit Edge, Internal Culture Report, Phase 14 Days. She looked at each of them. No one spoke. No one dared. "Good morning," Lena began, voice steady and clear. "I'm Lena Brooks, daughter of Henry Brooks, and the official successor to the CEO position at Summit Edge." No one breathed. Veronica went pale. Damien was stone still. Victor's hand clenched around his briefcase. Karen looked down at her hands, either trembling or hiding something. "I've been here the past 2 weeks," Lena continued. "Not as a director, not as an heir, but as an invisible person inside the very system my father built. And I'm here to present a truth. Summit Edge isn't just flawed, it's rotting." She played the first clip. Victor dumping a cup of water on her in the hallway. The footage was grainy, but the sound was clear. The splash, the heavy breath. Victor's voice. "Now you have something real to clean up." A few gasped. One finance manager covered her mouth. Next, Damien demanding she re-clean his entire office 3 times, mocking her for even brushing the desk edge. Then, Karen in a recorded conversation in her office. "You're just a janitor. You can't compare yourself to real employees." And finally, the worst one, Veronica's slap. No one spoke. No one defended. The room fell into deadly silence. "This is what I've collected," Lena said, her voice unwavering. "But there's more. I have records of altered schedules designed to pressure new hires, internal messages about keeping workers unaware of labor laws, dismissed complaints buried by none other than the HR department." She paused, met every eye in the room. "And today, I'm not here for an apology. I'm here to end it." The boardroom doors opened. 2 security officers stepped inside, standing at each side. Karen stood abruptly, stammering, "This is a gross breach of protocol. You can't—" "You were silent when I was violated," Lena cut in. "Now that I'm speaking, you can sit and listen." Damien rose, intending to leave. "Sit down," Lena commanded, her voice sharp as a blade. "The meeting isn't over." Veronica sat frozen. Her eyes no longer burned with fire. They were filled with fear. Victor muttered, "I don't even know who you are." Lena stared him down. "Because you've never looked at the face of someone who cleans your floors." Then Henry Brooks walked in. He looked older than a year ago. but his eyes had never been sharper. "She's your CEO," he said, "and this meeting is a formal disciplinary hearing, summoned by the board of directors." Within 30 minutes, 4 names were announced for immediate termination due to severe violations of workplace ethics. Victor Langford, head of operations, Damian Carter, director of marketing, Karen Summers, director of human resources, Veronica Wells, VP of sales. Lena didn't look away as each of them was asked to leave the building. Not for revenge, but to prove this. With enough truth, even silence becomes a witness. Even the invisible can demand accountability. The 42nd floor boardroom was no longer noisy. No more clinking coffee cups on porcelain saucers. No more frantic keystrokes or the rustle of papers being shuffled in nervous haste. What remained was silence after a storm, and in that stillness stood Lena, alone, facing the door that had just shut behind those escorted out. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She didn't clap. What she felt wasn't victory. It was release. The large black leather chair at the head of the table remained empty. She pulled it back gently and sat, for the first time in 14 days, letting her feet truly rest. Her back leaned lightly against the chair, not in a posture of power, but like someone who had climbed the last step of a mountain after hundreds of jagged stones. The door opened again. She didn't have to look to know who it was. Henry Brooks, her father, walked in slowly. No longer the sturdy man he once was. His health post-stroke now required a cane. But his eyes were brighter than Lena could ever remember. No more fatigue, no more hesitation. Only one thing remained: pride. He stood there taking in the sight of his daughter in a simple white blouse, loose hair, sitting in the same room once ruled by names who thought themselves untouchable. "You did it," he said. "No congratulations necessary." Lena looked at him, her eyes moist but not yet broken. "I just returned the company to what you taught me it should be," she whispered. "Never let silence become the operating system." He walked closer, set his cane aside, and bent down. Not as the legendary CEO, not as the symbol of black excellence who'd built an empire, but as a father. Henry opened his arms and pulled Lena in tightly. Not a hug of consolation, but of recognition. The kind of embrace from a man who spent his life climbing his mountain, only to see his daughter standing taller on hers. Lena let it be for a few seconds, then rested her forehead on his shoulder. And then, the tears came. Not from pain, not from shame, but because she didn't have to keep holding it in anymore. She had worn a mask for nearly 2 weeks, enduring slurs, stares, cruelty, and contempt, without once showing weakness. But now, in the arms of the only man who ever taught her to look injustice straight in the eye, she could finally be herself. After a quiet moment, Henry whispered into her ear, "You did what I spent my whole life avoiding, stepping into the dark to find out which lights are real." "I did it for you," Lena said, voice trembling. "For what you built. For the ones who lost their voice before ever getting to speak." Henry loosened his embrace, looked at his daughter. "And now, you found that voice, not with a microphone, but with your dignity." They sat down side by side. No strategy talks, no business plans. Just 2 people, looking out the glass window as the city stirred into a new Monday. "I was once fired for calling out a white supervisor back when I worked in IT," Henry said. "Back then I believed, if I worked hard enough, they'd have to listen." "But they didn't," Lena said. "No," he nodded. "They didn't. But today, they had to listen to you." By late morning, as Lena walked the halls for the first time without a mop in her hands, the lower-level employees started whispering. A few recognized her, not from the news but from the bruises they'd seen, the water-stained shirt, the red mark on her cheek, the scuffed shoes, the patient eyes. Rosa, the young woman from Honduras, froze as Lena walked toward her. You're Lena," she smiled. "But to you, still just Janet if you'd like." Rosa stammered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Lena placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No one has to apologize for not knowing. Just don't stay silent once you do." As Lena passed the stairwell, she saw Darnell again. The older man looked up from polishing a radio. Their eyes met in a quiet, knowing moment. He didn't ask. She didn't explain, but he nodded. Slow, subtle. She nodded back. In their eyes, there were no congratulations, only the shared understanding of those who once lived invisible. That night, Lena returned home. She opened her encrypted digital journal and wrote the final entry in the long chain of notes. Day 11. They used to think I had nothing to say. Now they don't dare interrupt me. Tuesday morning, 6:52 a.m. For the first time in over 2 weeks, Lena entered the Summit Edge headquarters through the front doors. No more janitor's uniform, no more lowered eyes, no longer an invisible woman. She wore a crisp white blouse, a charcoal gray blazer, her hair neatly tied back. Around her neck hung a temporary CEO badge, printed through the very admin system she had once existed outside of. But what made the front desk staff freeze wasn't the badge. It wasn't even the title. It was her eyes. The same eyes they had seen for weeks, but had never truly looked at. Inside the executive boardroom, the atmosphere was still unsettled. Some avoided Lena's gaze. Others forced small talk, polite smiles, hollow jokes. But everyone knew this wasn't the old Summit Edge anymore. Every mask had been pulled off. Every dismissal, every act of psychological violence and power abuse had been documented, projected, and could no longer be denied. Lena didn't rush to speak. She turned on the projector. The first slide appeared. Listen. Rebuild. Restore respect from the ground up. No logo. No flashy branding. She looked around the room and said, I'm not here to tear down Summit Edge. I'm here to rebuild it, from the basement to the boardroom. That morning, Lena announced 3 sweeping reforms. 1. Full dissolution of the existing HR department. Karen Summers had been dismissed, but that wasn't enough. Lena ordered a full shutdown of HR for 1 week. During this time, the department would be restructured from scratch. New hires would form a team called Internal Ethics and Peer Dialogue. Its focus: transparency, safety, and accountability. 2. Establishment of the Dignity and Culture Committee. This new committee would include logistics workers, maintenance staff, IT personnel, even interns. Each would have direct access to the CEO twice a month, no middle managers, no filters. 3. The 5 Minutes Between Worlds program. Every week, one senior manager would swap roles with a frontline employee for 5 minutes, not to instruct, not to correct, but to listen, only listen. That afternoon, Lena held a short meeting with the janitorial and logistics staff, not in a conference room, but in the cramped break room where she had once sat scrubbing her shoes with an old toothbrush. Darnell was there. Rosa, too. A few others stared in quiet awe, their CEO wearing sneakers, sitting cross-legged on a plastic bench beside them. Lena didn't bring a speech. She just said, I can't fix everything overnight, but I can promise this. Starting today, none of you are invisible anymore. 3 days later, Summit Edge's internal homepage was updated with a new CEO message. We used to believe power came from innovation, but now we understand real power comes from knowing we were wrong and choosing to change. Beneath the message was a full list of reform task forces, each with names from janitorial, reception, kitchen, maintenance, and operations support. Names that had never appeared in a single strategic memo until now. But not everyone cheered. A small group of legacy staff muttered during lunch about how the new CEO is just a PR stunt. She doesn't get how real enterprise systems work. Idealistic reforms like this are bound to fail. Lena heard it all, and she didn't stop them. Because she knew, culture doesn't change with a single meeting. It changes through quiet persistence, every single day. That evening, Lena received an anonymous message in her internal inbox. I used to think you were just that annoying cleaning lady, but now I realize you didn't just clean the floors, you wiped off our masks. She didn't reply. She simply saved the message into a private folder titled, Signs of the Season Changing. Thursday, 3 days after the historic meeting on the 42nd floor. No grand media statement, no flashy new CEO campaign on LinkedIn, no press, no hashtags, just one quiet announcement on the internal company portal. Summit Edge is officially restructuring its culture. Everyone is encouraged to share their work experiences, anonymously or publicly, via the internal submission portal. No one expected much. Some rolled their eyes. Another PR stunt, they thought. But then, at 9:27 a.m., an email appeared from janitorial3 at summit.internal subject. I was once locked in the supply room. Last year, I was locked in the supply room for 2 hours because a mid-level supervisor said I was being too loud while mopping near a boardroom. I called out, pounded the door. No one came. No one opened it. When they finally let me out, they said it was a technical glitch. I didn't report it to HR. They told me if I wanted to keep my job, silence was the only way. No names, no accusations. But the truth doesn't have to scream. It rings like a bell with a single strike. 1 hour later, another email from mailroom.temp at summit.internal subject. When they treat you like air, I'm a logistics intern. Once, while delivering documents to a boardroom, an executive physically moved me aside, like I was furniture. No apology, no eye contact. That's when I realized here, you don't need to mess up to be disrespected. You just need a lower title. Then came another, and another. 5, 10. By the end of 48 hours, over 126 submissions flooded the system. More than 70% were from departments that never made it into the brochures: security, logistics support, internal accounting, customer service, night shift IT, emergency maintenance. Lena sat in her newly reconfigured office. No oak desk, just a plain white steel table, 2 facing chairs, and a whiteboard covered in pinned notes. She read each message. Alone. No assistant, no skimming. By late afternoon, she handwrote a letter. To those who once thought your voice had no worth, I read every word you shared. I don't need to know your name or your face, but I know this much. You are the true heart of Summit Edge, and that heart was neglected. If it's still beating today, it's because you stayed, and you still believed that one day you'd be seen. She posted it on the main bulletin board in the lobby, a space that, for a decade, had only shown maintenance schedules and evacuation procedures. Lena insisted it not be sent by email. She wanted people to walk past it, to pause, to read. The next day, something remarkable happened. Darnell, the man once demoted from engineer to janitor, stepped onto the stage during Summit Edge's first company-wide meeting under Lena's leadership. No one invited him to speak. No one expected him to. But there he was, before 200 employees, holding the mic, his voice raspy but unwavering. I used to stay quiet because I thought I couldn't change anything. I used to believe that if I spoke up, I'd lose my job. But today I understand. It was silence that cost me, not my job, but myself. The room fell silent, not out of politeness, but because something inside it was breaking and being born anew. After the meeting, something strange began to unfold. A former intern began blogging about her experience with verbal harassment and received dozens of support messages from team leads. An IT employee volunteered to redesign the internal feedback system to be usable by people who don't have MBAs. A group of janitorial staff proposed a reverse feedback training for incoming managers. No one told them to do it, but they stood up anyway. Lena didn't cry, but with every new message, she pinned another small paper square to her office whiteboard, each with a single quote. By the weekend, over 40 notes were on that board. Her new assistant asked, "How many do you plan to put up?" Lena didn't turn around. She simply replied, "As long as there's still someone out there who once thought they didn't deserve to be heard." That evening, Carlos, a night shift security guard, once humiliated by Victor for greeting guests too quietly, appeared at Lena's office door. He hesitated. "Ms. Lena, I'm not great with words like the others, but I just wanted to say thank you, because for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I just work the night shift. I feel like I actually belong here." Lena stood, reached out her hand. "You've belonged here for a very long time. They just refused to admit it." Saturday afternoon, Summit Edge was quieter than usual. No rushed footsteps racing toward last-minute meetings. No phones ringing off the hook from the sales floor. The upper levels glowed under soft, amber lighting, as if the building itself needed the weekend to heal. Lena walked slowly down the 40th floor corridor, the same hall she had scrubbed over and over until her hands went numb, while suits passed her without so much as a glance. Each floor tile beneath her feet, every closed office door, every crevice in the wall, held memories. She stopped in front of the old supply closet, the door where Victor once cornered her, the place where Darnell once whispered, "Don't let him see you angry." She reached for the cold steel handle. No fear now, no pain, just a strange calm, like a scar that no longer stings but never forgot. She moved on, down to the small break room at the end of the hall, where janitors used to scarf down lunch on plastic chairs, where she once split a protein bar with Rosa. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, someone was wiping down the tables, a small girl with low-tied black hair. It was Rosa. Lena smiled. "What are you doing?" she asked gently. Rosa turned, startled, then flushed. "I just wanted to clean up a bit. There's a visitor tour tomorrow." Lena stepped in. No blazer, no laptop, just a navy blue sweater, sleeves loosely rolled up. She grabbed a fresh cloth from the shelf and began helping. "You don't have to," Rosa stammered. "It's all right," Lena chuckled softly. "I still remember how to wipe a table." And just like that, the two of them worked in silence. No speeches, no small talk. Only the soft sounds of cloth against tabletop and the breeze whispering through a cracked window. A quiet peace, the kind Summit Edge had lost and was slowly learning to earn back. Afterward, Rosa looked at Lena, her voice tentative. "Lena," she hesitated, "when you were still working here, why didn't you ever get angry? If I were you, I would have quit the moment Victor yelled." Lena paused, then sat beside her, back against the wall. "I wanted to quit," she said slowly. "I hated myself sometimes for staying quiet. But then I realized, if I left, others would stay. They'd still suffer, still be silent, and the system would never know what it had done." Rosa was quiet for a long time before whispering, "Weren't you afraid?" "Yes," Lena nodded, terrified. "But I was more afraid of walking past injustice and doing nothing." As they left the break room in the dust-colored light, Lena spotted someone down the hallway. Darnell. He was checking the lighting grid, flashlight in hand. "Darnell," she called. He turned, squinting. The ceiling lights cast a soft glow across his now whiter hair. "Well, look who it is," he smirked. "Good evening, CEO." Lena laughed and waved it off. "Don't start with that. It's just Lena." He walked closer, voice steady and low. "You know, when I was young, I believed that if I worked hard, they'd listen. If I stayed quiet, they'd leave me be. If I endured, they'd pity me." He looked straight at her. "I was wrong." Lena stood still, listening. No one pities the silent. No one respects the compliant. Justice doesn't come from enduring. It only arrives when someone, like you, steps into the space between light and dark and says, "I'm here, I see this, and I won't look away." They stood together, watching the corridor, the freshly cleaned floors no longer just walkways for the invisible. "Darnell," Lena said without looking away, "would you help me build the new workplace culture training for all incoming managers?" He raised his brows. "You sure?" "I'm just an old electrician." "Exactly. You saw what all the old managers pretended not to." As they turned to leave, Rosa ran up and handed Lena a small folded piece of paper. "I wrote this a while ago, but I only got the courage to give it to you today." Lena opened it. One line scribbled in blue ink. "You don't have to be a CEO to change the world. You just have to be someone who doesn't give up." That night in her small apartment, Lena sat by the open window, watching the amber lights stretching down the boulevard. She wrote in her journal, "Day 14. The ones who were once silenced are finally speaking, not with shouts, not by pounding the table, but simply by staying. And that is how the world changes. One breath, one step, one quiet, defiant voice at a time." 6 months later, Summit Edge was no longer just a name associated with revenue targets, product strategy, or innovation showcases. It had become something else, appearing in HR forums, podcasts, and leadership summits. Not because of a slick PR campaign, but because of stories passed hand to hand, not told by spokespeople, but by people who once had no voice at all. Rosa, now a full-time employee, was studying human resources at the local community college on an internal scholarship provided by Summit. She still cleaned offices in the early mornings, but every Wednesday afternoon, she sat in the cross-level dialogue room, offering feedback directly to executive leadership. And every comment she made was carefully recorded. Darnell was now the company's first ever supervisor of workplace culture, a title that had never existed before. He didn't speak in every meeting. He didn't wear a suit. But when he walked into a room, people listened. Because he didn't represent hierarchy, he represented memory. Lena, throughout those 6 months, never once appeared on television. She declined every media request, every invitation to speak about the sensational CEO reversal. This wasn't a coup, she said when asked. It was a cleanup, not of dust on desks, but of the way we've come to see each other. On a crisp early autumn morning, Summit Edge held a logistics appreciation day. No banners, no cameras, just warm breakfast sandwiches, free coffee, and one rule. Every senior manager must personally shake hands with and listen to one frontline story. No one was forced to speak, but over 50 people did, from stories about being ignored in the cafeteria to being called the wrong name for 3 straight years. The last person to speak was Gladys, an elderly night shift laundry worker, employed at Summit for 16 years. Her voice was so soft that the room held its breath just to hear. On my first day here, no one asked me my name. Yesterday, someone knocked on my door and gave me a small nameplate. For the first time, I felt like I had a name, at Summit Edge. That night, Lena stood alone on the rooftop of the building. Cool breeze, the city lights twinkling beyond. A cup of black tea in her hands. No sugar, a habit from her late-night janitor shifts. She didn't think about success. She didn't think about titles. She didn't think about those who had been fired. She thought about 2 moments. The moment Veronica slapped her in the boardroom. The moment Gladys spoke of being finally recognized. 2 moments, entirely different, yet both turning points for change. One came from pain, the other from healing. Neither required shouting. Both just needed to be heard. The next morning, Lena posted a single sentence to the internal bulletin board. No logo, no formatting, just a line. We don't change through fists. We change by asking, why haven't I seen you before? At 6 p.m., she left the office. No driver, no assistant, just Lena, wearing a canvas jacket, earbuds in, and a quiet jazz playlist spinning on Spotify. As she passed through the ground floor hallway, a young IT staffer gave her a small nod and said gently, "Have a good evening, Ms. Lena." She smiled and nodded back. "Thank you. Hope you get off on time." He froze for a beat, then smiled. A real smile. Not tense, not polite. The kind of smile someone gives when they know they've finally been seen.